On tonight's show, we're going to introduce Mike to a new mechanical handheld. Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly at Kelly on social media. And joining me, as always,
I am Dr. Mike at Official Pagan on all social media platforms. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, because we know you already love it. And we know you're probably already subscribed, but why don't you make a second fake account? Subscribe through that. The two of you get into an argument in the comments, as many comments as you can possibly fit in there. And you know what? Both you and your alter ego need to do it while you're wearing some merch. So make sure you hit up our merch store and pick up our latest t shirts.
excellent plan. And then I think they should challenge you and your alter ego should challenge each other to who can watch more of our videos all the way through. Just watch them again, put them on an endless loop, do whatever you can. Um, Not that we're begging for watch time, but we're begging for watch
A
time.
good a
So,
good way to get started too is with Hard No, the world's shortest podcast. It comes free with your free subscription. Knock out a couple hundred episodes of that, then work your way up to the longer episodes. You're gonna thank us.
indeed. Cool. Well, it's always concerning when I get a communication from Mike and the topic matter is something like mechanical handheld that I don't really know what I'm going to see when I click on that
But
link.
you still clicked on it.
I still, well, yeah, I did because I'm committed to the art. So I did click on it. And we have talked in the past about the wonderful world of Sega early days and the electromechanical games that they would put out, like Periscope, that I still love and am continually looking to see if I could get one. Although I gotta imagine if I got one, it's probably not going to be an operating order, and I'm going to lack the electronic knowledge to get it to work. But man, and it also probably weigh about 5,000 pounds, so there'll be a few things there. But they're just so cool. So check out that video we did on Periscope and the such. It's really cool. But and I was completely unaware of this. Adam Savage kind of does a How It Works series of videos. And on this one, he went in deep coverage on a couple of handheld mechanical games, which I was unaware of either of these. Had you even heard of either of these before you watched the video?
So not those specific games, but the first one, which they spend the bulk of the video on, is a racing game, and I've played similar mechanical racing games.
Yeah, and I was actually impressed. While they're not small units, uh they're not huge. I mean, I would,
No.
I just kind of assumed it would be larger. And in fact, one, it's almost much more of a wind up power based versus battery based, which I thought was super interesting, but like a lot of engineering that goes into it. And so I was kind of familiar and had an idea on how the mechanics would work for a full size thing like Periscope, where you're shooting torpedoes underneath a fiberglass sea towards ships that are on the background. But I didn't really know how you'd pull that off in a handheld form factor. But I mean, I would argue it's, not a whole lot inferior to like the little Casio football games and stuff and baseball games. They used to have little handhelds there. The gameplay looks not, you're using film and light to do it versus just little LEDs. And I thought it was also just incredibly in depth and uh, Bog Panda needs to do a GoFundMe so we can get one of those X-ray machines they've got that can the two layers because I don't know what we'll use it for, but it looks super cool.
Yeah, I thought the X-raying machines to really see how they work. So I had played a couple of mechanical handhelds. They were racing based ones. Didn't really know that it was film in there and that's how it works. So that was really interesting to kind of learn that. When they were doing that though, and they were showing the process of X-raying these so they could see each of the layers of it, I thought that was really cool. But then they also take it apart. So I felt like, well, I mean, it makes X-raying it still cool, but unnecessary in the grand scheme of things if you were still going to take it apart and show us. But then while there's a lot less time spent on it, there is a second handheld that you get where you're shooting torpedoes. And that one, as Kelly mentioned, is more of like a hamster on a wheel running it. And for that one, they did not attempt to take that apart.
Yeah, and they were both working. They were both still pretty functional, and Adam was definitely familiar with the first one. I guess it was one he played a lot, but it's absolutely worth watching this video to just kind of see the impressive engineering that went into the creation of these, because it's really impressive. They get a lot done in a little bit of space and were really kind of clever and seem to, maybe a little bit more than we see today, take some steps to say, how can we build this so that it doesn't wear out right away? Because you could see how certain parts of that, if it was that film was rubbing across the top, that would degrade really quickly and all those types of things. They kind of thought through all that and had something that was, I mean, I don't know how old this one was that they were playing, but it would have had quite a few years on it.
I don't remember if they gave a time frame to the second game, but the racing game they did mention was at least 40 years old.
Yeah. So, and still working great. And so it was really cool. Yeah, I was really impressed. Well, one, I kind of like the structure of what he's Adam's doing there on the show itself. The concept's good. Bringing in somebody who's got some background as well, and they show you cool X-ray machines, and they really do kind of explain things pretty well on how all of it works. But it's a fascinating thing to see. We remain, the only podcast that has consistently stated that VR needs to get on the bandwagon and recreate all the old Sega electromechanical games in VR. Totally will buy it. So, my gift to you, who's ever going to make a VR game, please do that. These would work too. I think. I guess the VR there would be your hands on the virtual. You'd be holding the thing in your hands and playing it that way, which would still, I think, be kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think this stuff is really interesting. It's kind of the weird, like, missing link between board games and video games, where it's a manual thing that you're holding, but it's kind of like a video game in that it's a presentation on a screen in front of you you're interacting with. So it does feel like this weird lost generation of gaming.
Yeah, it's uh, a kind of transitional life form between
Yeah.
board games and video games. And back in the day, those folks were pretty clever in finding ways to do it, because uh, we had, at one point in time, we had gotten, it was old when we bought it, an old version of a football simulation game that would consist of large, almost looked like a manila folder colored cards that were about the size of a manila folder, that would have offensives and defenses on them. And so one team guy would pick their defense, the other person would pick their offense. You'd lay those two on top of each other. You'd slide them into this thing that had a light bulb underneath it, and then you began to slowly pull the cardboard shutter that was there, that would start the play, and they would show the dotted line where either the pass was going or the person was running. And so when the offensive dot ran into the defensive dot for the first time, that's where they were tackled. And it was quite a few versions away from Gridiron, which is an awesome football simulation game with X's and O's too, or just little dots, but super cool. That was its predecessor. So these transitional life forms are pretty cool to look at.
Yeah, it is really interesting. These weren't really too much of a thing when by the time, when I was a kid, we were well into video games. Handheld consoles weren't fully a thing yet, but the sort of like the LCD screen Tiger electronic stuff did
Yeah.
exist. So that was kind of replacing this, I guess, at that point. But I do remember, playing one of those racing style ones. And even as a kid, just being like, okay, I understand this is not a video game, but I don't understand how it works. I don't know what's happening here. Because even with like I'm not a programmer or super tech savvy guy, but even as a kid, playing with the Tiger Electronics games, like I understood that they were essentially like calculators where everything was already on there and was just lighting up the pertinent information depending on the button combinations you were hitting. So I understood in some vague way this works like a calculator works. It's not like a real video game like I would play on my NES and things like that, but it was the next step above kind of this. Whereas when I did briefly play one of these mechanical games like this, I had no idea how that worked.
Bog Panda.